guys, we are back. It's been a little bit since we've uploaded. So yeah, here we are. Chapter 18. It wasn't until Clay felt the sand under his talons and heard the roaring of the dragons in the stands that he realized he hadn't quite thought this plan through. He had no idea what his fighting skills would be like against unknown dragon. His mind went blank as the Skywing guards dropped a hissing ice wing onto the ground opposite him. Did he know anything about ice wings? The sun was high in the sky, and it was much warmer in the arena than up on the prisoners' spires. Clay could see beads of silvery liquid dripping through the ice wings' glacier blue scales. Above them, Queen Scarlet smirked from the balcony, with Glory sleeping sincerely behind her. The same Skywing announcer from the day before strutted to the center of the arena and bellowed at the crowd. Dungeon after last month's battle with Blaze's army, our queen's dungeons were stuffed with Icewing prisoners of war. Only 9 have survived. After 2 wins, I give you F. George of the Icewings. F. George lashed his tail and snarled at Clay. And in this corner, an unusual cage, a mudwing, but not one of our allies. No, this dragonette was found hiding under the mountains, protected by the Talons of Peace. Is he one of the dragons of destiny? Not if he loses the battle. A murmur of laughter rippled around the seats, but in the closest faces, Clay could see expressions of uneasiness and, he thought, concern. He spotted a large mudwing in one of the balconies, frowning down at him. Try to stop this, Clay thought at him. Praying hard, do something, I'm one of you. But the mudwing shifted his gaze away. He didn't want to watch, but couldn't afford to leave. The Skywing announcer went on. If these prophesied dragons are as wonderful and legendary as they're supposed to be, this should be a showdown to remember. I hope you're prepared to impress us, Dragon of the Mud. I present you Clay of the Mudwings! Claws up, teeth ready, fight! Clay blinked as the Skywing flew out of the arena. He'd never been called one of the Mudwings before. It might have been a warmer feeling if he hadn't been surrounded by more than 200 dragons, including Mudwings, ready to applaud his imminent death. He felt quite far from wonderful and legendary as the Icewing slithered toward him. This was it. Kill or be killed. Time to find out if he did have a monster inside and fit it was the useful kind, or the kind that would make him hate himself afterward, or both. F. George's pale blue scales were the color of sky reflected in the snow on the distant mountain peaks. His eyes were slightly darker blue and full of malice. Extra horns, like a ruff of icicles, stood out around his head. A long claw scratched down his neck had barely begun to heal, with dry blood sticking out to the scales around it. He hissed, darting a deep blue forked tongue between his icicle-sharp teeth. Hello, Clay, as the ice wing drew closer. F. George, right? Hello, Clay said, as the ice wing drew closer. F. George, right? F. George stopped and stared at him, still flicking his tongue in and out. He was only a head taller than Clay, but he looked a lot older and scarier. I've never met an ice wing, Clay said, edging back a step. I've never met much of anyone, really. I guess I read that you were all the color of ice, but I didn't realize ice came in so many colors. You know, blue, very surprising. It's cool. Though, oh, haha, no pun intended. Boo! Called several dragons from the upper seats. More blood, more death. Someone bite somebody. Are you trying to get us both killed? The ice wing growled. Shut up and let me kill you. I'd rather not, Clay said, stumbling back another few steps. A flicker of moment caught his eye, and he glanced up into the sky. Star was nearly leaning all the way off his column, flailing his tail and bowing wings frantically at Clay, trying to tell him something, but what? Something about ice wings, something they learned from scrolls and lectures. Something pretty important, judging from the way Starflight is freaking out. The Nightwing was pointing to his mouth. Fire? Clay looked at F. George dubiously. He didn't think Icewing could breathe fire. Wouldn't they end up melting their palaces every time they use it? Then again, F. George was definitely doing something with his mouth, and it wasn't smiling. Clay ducked and rolled out of the way just as a blast of what looked like sparkling smoke shot out of F. George's mouth. A tiny bit of it brushed his wingtip, and Clay felt a horrible chill rattle through his whole body. Oh, right, freezing death breath. That is important. Thanks, Starflight. Now he remembered the freezing streams of cold air that ice wings could shoot from their mouths, of course. He couldn't remember anything about how to fight it. Fire would probably help, though. Clay inhaled, pulling the warmth up from his chest as F. George had snapped around toward him. The ice wing opened his mouth to breathe on Clay again, and Clay sent a blast of fire right between his teeth. F. George jerked back and scrambled across the sand, battling at his mouth with clamped wings. The flames had been swallowed instantly by the chill of his scales, but the ice wing looked even angrier than before. Sorry, Clay said. Listen, do we have to fight? What will happen to us if we... After was interrupted by racing at him with his front talons outstretched. Clay had to shut up and dart out of the way, barely dodging the sharp claws. F. George, long with thin tail, snaked around and whacked him across the face, so Clay was momentarily blinded. Instinctively, Clay threw his wings over his head and lashed out with his back talons. He felt one connected and heard F. George roar of pain as his sight cleared. He saw that he'd accidentally hit the scratch on F. George's neck, which was bleeding again. F. George fell back for a moment, touching his neck gingerly with his claws. His tail lashed and his bound wings beat the air. How am I going to get out of this, Clay thought. He couldn't feel a monster rising up inside him. Whatever had driven him to attack the other dragoness at hatching was buried too deep. He didn't want to kill F. George. He didn't want to kill anyone. He wondered if he should have let Tsunami fight instead. No, I'm the first hatch and the biggest. I couldn't let any of the others risk themselves when I could fight for them. He clawed at the sand and lowered his head to stare into F. George's eyes. I have to kill him, don't I? There must be a part of me that can do that. He'd always hoped this monster wouldn't be necessary. Some part of him had always figured that the prophecy would somehow come true. The war would end, and all dragon killing could be avoided forever and ever without of him ever having to hurt another dragon. But it's too soon for the prophecy. Our fault for escaping early. Still, we had to save Glory. Boo! More dragons in the crowd shouted. A sheep could have won this fight by now. What are you doing? Thinking. Less thinking, more killing. Claw him, claw him, claw him. It sounded just like Kestrel. Clay couldn't tell if they were rooting for him or F. George, or whatever they just wanted to see someone to die. F. George dropped to all fours and ran at Clay again, hissing with his tongue as if he were about to shoot more freezing air. Kestrel's shouted battle commands flashed through Clay's head. He dropped and rolled under F. George as the ice wing flew at him with a click splash. Clay raked F. George under his belly, leaving a trail of blood through the softer scales. He flipped back upright and spun to his face. The other dragon again. F. George shrieked, doubling over. Yay! Shouted the crowd. What is wrong with you? F. George yelled at Clay. That's not how mudwings fight. I was trained in your techniques. Well, I wasn't. Clay said, sorry, he wondered whether he fought like a Skywing said. The way Kestrel had always wanted. He had a feeling she was saying no, he didn't fight like a Skywing. He fought like a lame wild beast. But at least it seemed to catch the opponent off guard. Clay dug his claws into the sand, watching F. George clutch his bleeding belly. If he attacked now, he could surprise the other dragon and maybe even win. But it felt bad enough seeing the damage he inflicted. You couldn't imagine doing worse. Like what? Could he break F. George's neck? He shuddered, remembering again the crack of Dune's neck snapping. That wasn't him, no matter what Kestrel or Peril said. All right, dragons. Queen Scarlet's voice cut through the rumble of the crowd, and everyone went still. F. George and Clay, we don't have all day. Some of us have kingdoms to run. One of you have to kill the other one right now, or I'm coming down there to end you both myself. F. George snarled and dashed at Clay again. There was no time to think. Clay reared up and glided extra horns around F. George's head, shoving the Ice Wing's snout aside before freezing breath hit him. The cold air blasted toward the lowest row of seats, and several dragons clambered over each other to get away, yelping with alarm. F. George's talons looked around Clay's chest, and they grabbed and grappled across the sand. Clay's wings were pummeled by F. George's, which are silvery and strangely tough. Sounds were full, trying to keep F. George's head pointed away from him. He couldn't fight back as F. George clawed his shoulders. Bright pain zigzagged through Clay's scales. Time to die, F. George growled. He whimpered his tails around to trip Clay's back and legs, and two dragons went down in a heap, with F. George on top. The Ice Wing wrapped his claws around Clay's neck and pressed hard, failing again. Clay thought hopelessly as the strength in his arms began to fade for the last time. In a moment, he'd have to let it go. The Ice Wing's head would be free, and F. George would blast Clay with a final killing breath. Then it would be over. Okay, we were gonna end right there. I'll see you guys later. Bye. We are moving on to chapter 19. Might have to change the schedule again. Don't worry. We'll be back. Bye. Johnny out. Peace.